There is an insane 71 operators in Rainbow Six Siege right now, which can seem very overwhelming to the average Siege player. Which is why in today's video, I'll be going over the 11 different roles in Rainbow Six Siege to help you categorize all of these operators. The first role in Rainbow Six Siege, and arguably the most popular, is entry. Specifically, primary entry. Entry fragging is specifically an attacking role, where you go in and you get the first kill of the round, or at least you enter into the map, which is why it's called entrying, to then get that kill afterwards or at least take space. Entering, really, your role is at the beginning of the round. You want to be getting inside the building very quickly and getting an entry frag. That is your entire job. From then, you don't have to keep up that aggression. You can drone in, start using utility, but your job really is just within that first minute of the round to take space and to get kills. From then, just play normal Siege and have fun. It's a very easy role, very fun role, and that is why it is the most popular. Now, one quick thing that I really wanted to mention is the fact that entry fragging actually isn't about fragging. The role entry came from taking space and entering the building. It actually didn't come from entry fragging, because an entry fragger's role isn't actually to entry frag. It's to enter into the building and get the entry to space. You're supposed to take space. That's the whole job. Just like a roamer on defense's job is to waste time and hold space, your job as an entry on attack is to take space. It's much less about getting kills than you actually think, and it's much more about taking rooms as efficiently as you can so that your support teammates can get inside those rooms and then utilizing the walls in those rooms to open up other walls onto the site. You're just a space taker. That's why people who are an entry players that like play Lion or they play Dokkaebi, people who naturally are good at taking space, end up doing really well in those operators because the play style is very, very similar there. Again, just wanted to say, quick little disclaimer that if you are playing an entry, your job is not to get frags as much as it is to aggressively take space. Now, the reason that people end up getting frags anyways is because a lot of the times to take space, you have to get a kill along the way. That's just kind of a thing that happens on your way to doing your job, but it's not the main focus, and that's something that I thought that I would reiterate. Something that isn't as popular, but still just as fun, is secondary entry. This is the person that goes behind the primary entry and refrags them. For example, if you have an Ashe running in and you have a Yana who was behind the Ashe, maybe cloning the Ashe in, just refragging her, whatever it may be, that is a secondary entry, whereas an Ashe would be the primary entry. If you have an Amaru rushing in with a Ying on her window or a Blackbeard on her window or somebody with smoke grenades looking through that window, the person on the window who is baiting the primary entry would be the secondary entry. So secondary entry isn't really as popular of a role, especially in a ranked setting. It's more of a comp role, but it's just the person who gets the entry frags after the first entry fragger is dead, or it's the person who is baiting the first entry fragger. Pretty niche, I know, but still a role that you should look into nonetheless if you have somebody who's insta-locking your entry operators every single round. Moving on from a more aggressive playstyle to a more passive one, let's talk about primary support. Primary support operators are operators that need to get walls open or support their team with utility primarily, and they're not necessarily worried about taking space or getting kills. This would be operators like Thermite, like Ace. This would be operators for basement sites like Hibana. If you're a Maverick tricking, this would be the Maverick. This would be a Monty because you're just using utility and giving callouts. You're not really being aggressive unless you're a good Monty player, but you get the idea. You're just using utility and that's how you're winning the round. You're not really winning the round with kills, and you're using a lot of secondary utility to help get the bomb down. Something similar to primary support is secondary support. This would be the Thermite to your Thatcher, the Hibana to your Ace. This would be the Maverick to your Hibana, whatever. It's just the secondary piece of hard breach or something to help get your hard breach on the wall to then get the wall open. It's a support for a support player. You can even go as far as to say, like, if you have a Thermite and an Ace for two different walls, the Ace would be the secondary support, whereas the Thermite would be the primary support because Thermite has things like smokes and his breach is bigger, and typically he'll bring the diffuser. And the Ace really is just to provide pressure backside. Now, finally, wrapping it up for the attacker roles, let's talk about flex. Most people think that flex just means that you're not really an entry, you're not really a support, you're kind of just in between. Not true. Not only does flex not mean that, but people think that flex means you're not playing an entry fragger operator or you're not playing a support operator. This is not true either. For all of the other roles that I've discussed in this video, they've been very operator specific, but the flex role isn't operator specific. You can still play an Ace, you can still play a Maverick, or you can still play an Ashe or a Zofia and still be considered a flex operator, because flex is less about the operator selection and more about the playstyle. Let me explain. Let's say that I have two supports on my team, the primary and secondary support, that being a Thatcher and a Thermite, for example. I also have a flank watch on my team, like Gridlock, and I have an entry on my team like Ashe. If I were to play Buck, just because I like the utility, no strat in mind, I would have to be the flex because my entry players are too busy entering, my flank watch operators are too busy flank watching, and my support operators are getting walls open. So what the flex player does is he goes to wherever needs the most help. So if you have somebody who dies on the entry front, you would then become that entry. If you have a flank watch operator die, then you would get on the flank watch. If you have a support operator die, then you would find a way to help get the wall open or help get the bomb down. A flex player isn't an operator selection, but it's more about the fact that you know how to adapt really, really well in the round, and you like making solo heroic plays more than you like playing with the team and the general round flow. This is the most complicated and advanced role in the game because you have to know how to play entry and play support and play them good to be able to flex to whatever role you need in the middle of the round to help your team out. But that's enough about attacker roles. Let's go over a defensive role, which would just be flex but on defense. This is a bit simpler because it's much more easy to calculate where you're needed in the round because it's pretty cut and dry on defense. You got roamers, you got anchors. If a roamer dies, then go roam. Play a little bit more aggressive. Maybe lurk near the site. If you have an anchor die, then go back to site or play near the site, right? It's much more cut and dry on defense of a flex player, and because of that, there are certain operators that are naturally just good at flex, unlike attack where you can really play any operator. These operators would include operators like Legion, Ella, Alibi, Maestro, Jaeger, Wamai. Hell, even roamers like Vigil or anchorers like Mira can be flex operators if you flex correctly. Let's move it back to the attack though, where the next role that I'll be talking about is flank watch role. This role is pretty easy, and there's only about a few operators that actually do this role. It's Zero, Nomad, and Gridlock. That's it. That's all the operators that can reliably watch flanks with their utility. You don't even have to be playing a flank watch operator to be a flank watch role though. If you're just the designated person that watches the flank cams, even though you're playing an operator like Sledge, then that's good, because if you have everybody alive on your team and you have flank drones, then that means typically, because no one's dead, no one's watching those flank drones, so they're useless. But if you can designate yourself as the person who's watching the flank on the drones, or maybe watching your zero cameras, for example, then you would be the flank watch role, the flank watch person on your team, which is a very, very underrated and important role that if you don't have on your team, you should definitely pick up, especially for my flex players and my support players out there. Now, quick little disclaimer for flank watch operators is, honestly, you don't really need to be a flank watch operator. I see people playing Gridlock, Nomad, and Zero to watch their flanks because it gives you a piece of utility so you don't have to actually watch it yourself or with drones. Now, in a solo queue environment, this is great because you can't really trust your teammates to watch the flanks for you, and you can't trust them to watch your flank cams whenever they die. But if you're in a stack, maybe you're even playing competitively, I actually recommend not playing any of these flank watch operators if you're trying to use them for the flank. This is because you can easily use your prep phase drone to get cutoff cameras, so you don't need to waste that on playing Zero. And if you want to actually have flank watch with an air jab or with a Gridlock, just have somebody on the actual flank watch. I've died so many times because a Nomad is just on top of her air jabs holding the flank, when in reality she didn't even need to do that. She could have just not played Nomad and still held the flank and killed me. So a lot of the times, playing a certain operator to be the flank watch role on your team isn't necessary. You can be a flank watch with a Sledge, with a Thermite if your teams are doing something else, well, you have to get the wall open or whatever it may be. You don't have to play these operators. It's much more about the playstyle than it's operator specific. Something else that is great specifically for flex players and secondary support players is playing vert. If you're on a basement site or a first floor site where you can play above on a soft floor, you need to be playing vert with operators like Sledge, Buck, and Ram primarily are the vert operators. Also, there are operators that have shotguns that you can play vert on, like Deimos, Jackal, things of that nature. You can also bring vert with them. You can play vert with Hibana because she has breaching charges and she can get the hatch open, right? So having a vert player for the sites that are below where you can play above is also a needed role, just like the flank watch operator would be a needed role, right? So that's just another one of those roles that I wanted to quickly go over that you probably know about, but is still just as important as the other roles. Something that is much more important than that you need every single ranked game is roamers. Now, roamers are not people that get kills. That is a common misconception when people roam in Rainbow Six Siege. Your job as a roamer is to waste time. If attackers have 3 minutes of time, a good roamer will waste a minute and a half of that time bare minimum, so that they only have a minute and a half to use utility on site to get an execute and get the bomb down and win the round. The more time that you waste as a roamer because they're having to waste time clearing you out, the easier you make it for your anchors to hold the site because you're giving attackers less time to coordinate a push and less time to use utility on you. I talked about this in my last video. If you're playing vert and there's only 30 seconds left, you want to get off of vert. This usually happens because you have a good roamer on the enemy team who wasted 2 minutes of your time, so you don't even have time to make or play that vert. That is why roaming is so strong. I would rather have a roamer that gets 1 kill that wastes 2 minutes of the time than a roamer that gets 2 kills and wastes 30 seconds, because now they're just going to be on site with 3 players on vert with utility, which is hard for my anchors to deal with, instead of having no time at all to get any utility down and them fumbling the bag at the end of the round. All you are as a roamer is a first line of defense that the enemies have to go through. That's it. On the flip side of that coin on defense, you also have anchorers. These people are the people that I was talking about that you're trying to protect, the people that are sitting on site. This usually goes for support operators with not the best weapons, but utility that suits sitting on site, typically 3 armors or 2 armors at that. Operators like Smoke, Mute, Mira, operators with DMRs like Aruni, people with long scopes like Doc or Rook, or people who have utility that are rechargeable like Wamai or Legion or Azami. These are all people that need to be on or near site because it just makes sense for them to be doing that. These people are typically the last line of defense in order to win. They have utility more that helps them win rounds instead of guns. And at the beginning of the round, they're on cameras because there's not really much else they can do, or they're still setting up site, or they're helping their entries by giving callouts on the default cameras outside of the building. The complete opposite of roamers, but still just as crucial to winning your ranked games. Then the final role that I'll be going over is arguably the most crucial, even more than the last, and that is the IGL. Now, this is something that is pretty slept on in ranked, especially solo queue ranked, because you're not really giving comms and you're not really accommodated with your teammates and their playstyle. So it can be hard to IGL, especially if people just don't respect you. They'll just say F you and mute you, or they just won't listen, or they just don't have a headset, or they don't talk back. Like, it can be hard to do this. But a good IGL will make it to where it is 30 times easier for you to attack because you know what to do and you're good at listening to orders. Also, an IGL should be somebody that knows how to adapt to the situation at hand. It's somebody that goes, hey, break this deployable shield so I can pinch around this corner. We can get smokes down on the board, open up this wall, and get the plant down. It's somebody who's calling the shots. IGL just means in-game leader. It's someone who's leading. It's someone who is on thermite being like, hey, Thatcher, get this wall open for me. I'm going to smoke off this cutoff. We're going to get the plant down here while our teammates on vert covering us. That's an IGL. Having that makes attacking so much easier, or defending so much easier for that matter, because everyone knows what they're doing, what they should be doing, and if someone's experienced enough, typically he's right also, which makes it a lot easier for you to attack correctly. It's more of a role of an actual player and personality than it is for an operator, but it's something that I thought I should mention nonetheless. Now, I know that was all 11 roles in Rainbow Six Siege, but as a bonus honorable mention, there are some roles that didn't get mentioned because most people don't even think about it, but I'll go over them right now. The first of which being a tertiary entry. You have your primary entry, your secondary entry, but you won't really know about a third entry. It's really specific to operators and playstyles and competitive teams, and really only competitive teams have to think about it, which is why I didn't recommend it as one of the top 11. But it's still important. A tertiary entry is somebody who actually doesn't entry into the building immediately. There's somebody that entries very late. A knock player would be a great example of this, or a zero player. These types of playstyles are really rewarding for people who are very, very passive in the beginning of the round, but very aggressive and sneaky in the end of the round. If you get your 2 entry picks at the beginning of the round, or you get 1 entry pick, you get map control, whatever, a tertiary entry would be the knock on the other side of the map that takes a minute and a half to drone themselves in properly and dodge cameras, to then sneak attack people on the defense who have all of their heads turned towards your other teammates while you're shooting them in the back of the head. It's a really, really specific and niche role, but still a role nonetheless, and that's why it's on the honorable mentions list. On the flip side of that coin, you also have a tertiary support. This is also very rare because it's very site specific. The only site that I can think of for this being valid is gym on Clubhouse or basement on Chalet, where you need at least 2 hard breachers to win the round. Let's talk about top floor on Clubhouse. In gym, you need a thermite for the jacuzzi wall, and you need an ace for the CC wall, right? But you also probably need EMPs, like from an Osa, or maybe even a Thatcher. So the primary support would be the hard breacher, the secondary support would be the Thatcher or the ace, and then the tertiary support would be the Osa or the Thatcher if you have one. It's just another support that goes with your main hard breacher while your other hard breacher gets the wall, or vice versa. If you just have a lot of hard breachers on the table, you're going to have a tertiary support just because of how you need to attack the bomb site. And a lot of bomb sites are like this, but it's, again, very specific. I didn't think I need to mention it in the video. Another honorable mention would be a secondary IGL. Sometimes on competitive teams specifically, some people are really good at IGLing on attack, but they suck at IGLing on defense. So that's where you'd have a secondary IGL that maybe can support that while you do the other thing. Or I've even been on some teams where they have an early round IGL because they're really good at stratting, but they're not good at adapting, while we have a late round IGL because they're good at adapting, but they're not good at creating strats in the early round. So a secondary IGL isn't necessary, but if your primary IGL dies or he's just having a bad day, or maybe you need it because of a certain weakness they have, a secondary IGL can be just as important. And then the final honorable mention that I'll go over in this video is the lurker role. Now, in Siege on defense, you're either a roamer or an anchor, but there's a little in-between called a lurker, which is essentially somebody that's not on the site. They're just kind of near the site, but they're still so close to the site that you can't really consider it roaming. They're just kind of like in between. Again, these would be your flex players, but again, very site specific. Some people even don't even call them lurkers. They call them a different name, or they'll just say that they're anchors. It doesn't really matter. It's so much of a role that it doesn't really matter, that can be fit into other roles that, again, I didn't feel like it was a top 11 role, but it still is a role nonetheless that I have heard. So if you were looking for that on the list, there it is. That's it for this video. My name's Alka. Check out this next video, and I hope we'll see you there. Later.